Thank you, Jeremy, and all the other panelists today. We will now open the webinar to your questions, and we're going to be unmuting the phone, so there's probably going to be quite a bit of noise here for a minute or so. But Rod will probably be trying, if you would put your phones on mute when you're not asking a question, we sure would appreciate that. And then Ross can also mute a few phones if we're still having any problems. But here is how you can indicate your questions to us, but also we will then take questions that are verbally submitted to us as well. So we certainly encourage your questions, and let's start with, first let's talk to the answer guy here and see, do we have questions that have been submitted in writing?
This question probably is appropriate for Dick. Dick, do you really have only 1 or 2 seconds in the boiler for complete combustion of the combustible products?
You know, I've been doing this for a long time, and the first time I did the calculation on the gas volume and the vertical velocity in the boiler, it surprised me. We see some as low as a ½ second and 3/4 second from the top burners to the superheater. Yes, that's all we've got, and if we want to reduce the CO, we've really only got a short amount of time to get that done, and it is truly, in most cases, less than 1 second, Steve.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, let's ask people to try to get their phones on mute if they would be. We're still having some background noise, and let's go ahead with other. How many other additional written questions do we have?
I think just one more to add, Bob. Question is how does your approach to compliance impact future investment in back-end systems?
This is Jeremy. I think I'll take a first stab at that. I think that the point that we're trying to make here is that if we go through an approach of first testing to see where we are now and seeing where the opportunities are, there may not be a whole lot of investment that's required on the back end as far as new equipment goes. It might just be optimizing what you already have. And but the key point is we have to be able to test where you are now to make those decisions, and to work with customers and for the people to make those decisions as well.
Yeah, it's a good point. You know, we all know where we want to go to on the map, but if we don't know where we're starting from, it's a little difficult to get there.
This is John Kovat. Can I have it as well?
Absolutely.
Sure.
I think that's exactly. Jeremy hit it right on the nose. I think the purpose our alliance and the purpose for this particular webinar is to go after the low-hanging fruit. You know, simple things on our side, for example, improvements in removing slag and reestablishing gas lanes so that the gases can flow through as designed with little or no restriction, reducing tramp air in leakage because of that. Just the things that we've kind of sometimes in some cases have let slip by. And, you know, if we can revisit those and improve those programs, at least on our side, in the inspection and the repair and realignment process, there's not really a lot of capital money required to do that. And
to build off of that, if we focus on it holistically, we find these unseen opportunities that could be just basic tweaks to our process that could result in hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of savings in investment in downstream equipment. We have another question, and that is for the boiler case study on the mercury emissions, was the effect of different source coals on mercury emissions considered?
We believe that will be part of the ongoing process. For this set of boilers, very similar fuel sources were utilized on all 11 boilers. As we move on through this process, the fuel considerations are probably going to be the first things that we're going to look at. If you can get around some of the mercury emissions by simply changing fuels, and if that doesn't impact the rest of the process negatively, that's obviously a good choice to make. But that's part of this holistic process is we have to, you know, take these fuel suggestions and see how it impacts the combustion, the slagging, the boiler performance, the ESP performance, and the process all the way through.
Well, anyone would like to add to that? I hope that answered the question.
Other questions from the floor? I've got a number of them, but I will try to defer to the audience, and we certainly agree. You know, we got a lot more knowledgeable people on the phone than myself, so feel free to chime in. I might start with one. You talk about the low-hanging fruit. We heard EPRI talking. They give a very interesting presentation on advanced ultra supercriticals last week, and pointed out that they're going to be able to get 7,700 BTU per kilowatt hour. But they pointed out that the worst boilers, there's 10% of all the coal-fired boilers in the United States at 15,000 BTU. And I noticed in your presentation you talked about, you know, improving a 10,000 BTU per kilowatt hour heat rate. But what about the low-hanging fruit? What can you do for somebody that's that far off at 15,000?
This is Dick Storm. You want me to respond to that, Bob?
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, anybody, yeah.
Go ahead.
My experience has been, I have seen people spend hundreds of millions of dollars for scrubbers and SCRs and back-end equipment and walk right past expansion joints, casing tears on the furnace. They've not rebuilt their pulverizers. They haven't checked fineness in 5 years. The air heaters in one case were 25% leakage, but yet they spent $150 or $200 million on a scrubber or an SCR. And there's a lot of opportunities, and the problem that I've seen is a difference between capital dollars and O&M dollars.
Yeah. Are you
was
finished?
That for me to stop?
No. That was some sort of an accident there. Yeah, keep going. I don't know what that is, but are you finished with your comment there, or did you have some more on that?
Yeah, I pretty well got the gist of it across, Bob. Thank you.
Well, I'm not going to let you get by with just that brief a comment because following on what you said there, you know, you talked about air heaters that are in leaking more than the 9%, and you mentioned what the problem is on the sizing of the fans, but my question to you is, when you take that fan out, and because of this new equipment that you're talking in, you add 9 inches pressure drop for a fabric filter, and 6 or 9 inches for an SCR, and then do a few other things, and you're talking about putting a much bigger fan in. Then every one of those percent of air in leakage is just that much more energy consumption, right?
You're absolutely right, and I should add, the one case that I was involved where they had literally 25% leakage on the air heaters, what was credited on not doing that was not poor engineering or bad business practices, it was new source review, that they couldn't replace the air heaters, so I was told, because of new source review, and that putting in new air heaters and making significant upgrades a dirty word to the EPA, if we were to do those kinds of changes, it would trigger new source review. So many of the boilers in America could be run, probably 500 or 1,000 BTUs better in heat rate if we didn't have new source review.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And I'd like to follow on that, but I think I want to give other people a chance to chime in with new questions and so forth.
Hi,
I know we don't have any written, but go ahead.
Well, I spent most of yesterday on the phone with utilities, EPA, coal companies, and so forth. Happened to be in several different discussions, and it occurred to me at the end, we had some pretty substantial arguments. We've done a very extensive analysis for the National Mining Association that says, close to 100,000 megawatts of coal-fired power are actually at risk here if you take a literal interpretation of all the laws coming up. And so we got into pretty substantial arguments about all that. But what I would like to do is to, it just occurred to me yesterday, is we could really use the analogy of the fact that we're operating an old clunker here with most of these coal-fired plants. And, you know, we take it into the mechanic and find out that we need a new transmission system, which might be the air toxics rule or something like that. And then, but he also says, by the way, you know, in a year or two, you're going to need a new engine. And I would liken that to what Dick says here on New Source Review. You think every plant is just waiting till they get hit for it. You know, how can you put all this equipment on old plants and then not extend the life, et cetera, et cetera? And then we've got PM 2.5 and coming up, and we think that, you know, Los Angeles, just South Coast Air Quality District was very complimentary to themselves that they put in some new SO2 rules for all of South Coast Air Quality. They're going to reduce SO2 by 8 tons at a cost of only $50,000 a ton. But, I mean, that's the specter that we're looking at throughout the United States, where the states have to meet this ambient, you know, SO2, that, you know, the equivalent there, that we're not only looking at a new engine, but we may be looking at all sorts of new things. So, I mean, what the people today have been talking about is everything from changing the oil filters to all sorts of things that are certainly going to help. But I guess the question is, do we look at this thing too in phases? I mean, a plant that is eventually going to be retired is at 15,000 BTU per kilowatt hour. There's a lot of things that should be done regardless of whether the plant operates 1 year, 5 years, or whatever, right? Because a lot of these costs can be justified, can they not, you know, within 12 or months or 2 years or whatever?
I think, Bob, that we have to look at this practically, and we're looking at these old plants, and we could easily say with a big paintbrush and say, well, that plant is too old, it's not going to be economical to do anything, and let's just shut it down and throw it away. Where I think what's neat about the process that we talked about was we find these unseen opportunities where if we could gain 300 or 400 BTUs through this evaluation and looking at the whole system, that all of a sudden maybe that plant becomes more competitive, and then it starts being more practical. So I think that's a possible outcome of a holistic approach.
Yeah, I think that sounds very logical. Anyone else want to chime in on that? Well, I'd like to take that to the next step then, which is, you know, we have a contract with NMA to show how replacing all the coal-fired power plants in the United States with new coal-fired power plants is going to reduce equivalent CO2, because we have everything on a common metric of CO2 by twice the total, like 4 billion tons a year. In other words, if a ton of NOx is worth 100 tons of CO2 and so forth, by the time you calculate it all out, there's nothing that matches replacing all our old coal plants with new ones in the U.S. And what I would submit is that the industry pursue the environmentalists with a combination program, just what you're talking about today, saying that we will retire these plants, we'll replace them with new coal plants, but in the interim, we'll do all the things that you proposed today to greatly reduce the emissions per megawatt hour of electricity produced, and then that combination is best for the environment, for energy security, and for every other aspect of the economy in the United States.